I knew I needed a guest that could actually speak to the particulars of what the GMC is doing to equip lay leadership to work alongside clergy. It's not something that I'm real strong in. I don't have a lot of familiarity with. And so this right here is our guest for the day, Anthony McPhail.
If you're not familiar with the geography of Georgia, we are at the very southern part of the state, just a stone's throw from the Florida line. And it's a great place to be, home of Titletown, USA, winningest high school football team in the country, Valdosta High. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this. Jeffrey, you do a great job of kind of talking the broad spectrum of Methodism and things that have been going on the past few years. And I've been following your podcast for about a year, and just always have appreciated your content and your desire to spread the conversation. So thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to do it. It's been fun for me because I get to talk to important people, and I'm not an important person. I just get to lift up other important people. So, and I love that you got a chance to brag on your people. And how long have you been there, did you say?
I've been at Valdosta for 4 years. I moved right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, which was a wonderful time to be a new
Ugh.
pastor in a new community.
Okay. So, and you've been in ministry how long?
I've been in ministry for over 20 years. I started when I was in college. I've been under appointment, I guess you would say, for the past 13.
Okay. Okay. And you did seminary where?
I went to Emory and then I did a doctorate at Asbury.
Cool. Doctorate. Okay. So you're the Reverend Dr. Anthony McPhail. It is McPhail, right?
It is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so help me understand what's your background now in lay ministry in the Methodist world and specifically in the Global Methodist setup.
Okay, so I'll give a little bit of background. So, going back to my UMC days, I would be kind of in the rotation for teaching the lay speaker classes, that became lay servant classes, and also taught the certified lay ministry program as a part of the United Methodist Church. I also taught licensing school and course of study. So, I worked a lot with local pastors and also people who were laity that were discerning where God might use them in ministry. And so when I got ready to make the shift to the Global Methodist Church, that was one of the things that I was hoping I would still have an opportunity to be a part of. And fortunately, our conference, and particularly our president pro tem, Jay Hansen, that we were eager to hit the ground running and go ahead and roll out a program as soon as possible. And so last fall, we launched a program for certified lay ministry, basically taking nothing but the paragraph that's in the transitional book of doctrines and disciplines and developing a program around the key tenets that are laid out there. And so we started that program. We made some tweaks to it, ran it again in the spring based on some guidelines that have been approved by the Transitional Leadership Council. And now we're ready to run it again for the next year. And so we've got a new cohort launching in August. We'll do a kind of a la carte version where you can take courses at your pace throughout the year. And then also, we are going to be doing an immersion weekend that will be in January here in Valdosta, where if someone wanted to knock out all of the training, all of the coursework at one time, they could come to Valdosta, be here for a long weekend, Thursday through Sunday, and knock everything out.
So in designing this course, you'd already had similar courses you taught in the UMC. What is there a significant difference between what you taught in the UMC and what you're teaching now in the GMC?
I wouldn't say that it's a significant difference. There's a lot of, when we go over Global Methodist polity and Global Methodist history, that's obviously been updated from what we went over in the United Methodist Church. But for the most part, it's still a lot of the same tenets. We're basically just kind of reinvigorating it and making it more of a priority. I know when I taught lay ministry courses in the UMC, it would not be unusual for there to be a class canceled because there weren't enough people signed up for it. in the Global Methodist Church, we've had more than enough every time we've launched a course to have a full offering. There's been a lot of excitement, a lot of interest in it. And so that's really been the big difference, just the enthusiasm for it.
So, how much direction have you gotten from the GMC about designing this course, or did you just get to do whatever you wanted?
So the first round last fall, I basically got to do whatever I wanted. We took what was in the paragraph 402 in the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Disciplines. We said these are the areas that need to be highlighted, and we developed curriculum around it. And that was largely me pulling from my experience with course of study, lay speaker training, certified lay ministry training in the UMC, and kind of pulling that together. Last fall, I believe it was around September or October, the Transitional Leadership Council had put together a task force that developed some guidelines for what CLM training could look like. And
What was that task force? Say the name of the task force again.
I don't know what the name of the task force was, but
Okay.
they were charged with basically drafting a program. And I think draft is probably the right word, because it was definitely left open-ended with some flexibility for conferences to develop around what they had put together. So we took those guidelines. The Transitional Leadership Council did approve those, but also said very much, we want each conference to be able to develop their own. And so we used that and basically launched our next round of training in January around those guidelines. And I wouldn't say that it's not curriculum. It's not a workbook. They haven't produced that yet. That may come down the line. But it was essentially, these are the topics we want to make sure that you cover. And so we just developed the training around those topics.
So if I understood you correctly, in the formation of this program in South Georgia where you are, it's mostly you and one other guy who just have a passion for this. Is he clergy or laity?
Well, so I mentioned Jay Hansen, who's our president pro tem. He was the one
Okay.
who really gave the permission to take it and run with it. I've brought in, I'd have to go back and count, probably 5 or 6 different people that have helped to co-facilitate some of the courses. And so it hasn't just been me and one other person. So far, it has only been clergy that have been a part of the training. One of my goals for the future of the program is to do it with clergy and lay partnerships, where you would have a clergy person and a lay person working together to teach a course. But we haven't gotten to that point yet.
So before the split to the GMC, was the laity in South Georgia, were they strong, or is this like building a new thing now from a relatively weak laity?
No, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I wouldn't say that they were strong or weak prior to this. I would say maybe dormant might be the right word. They
Sure.
were kind of not exactly awakened, but we've had people who, and this goes back to the question that was posted on Facebook in response to your prompt. We have people who saw the need for churches that were going to be open and without a pastor, and they signed up for it, said, I'm not called to be clergy. I'm not called to serve a church long term, but I recognize that the harvest is plentiful, and these churches are ready and eager to continue in worship and continue in ministry. But right now they don't have leadership, and maybe I could fill that void for a little bit and then go back and be a part of my church. And so we've seen a lot of people that the need as churches disaffiliated and there were pastoral openings that were not anticipated, people jumping in and rising to that challenge. But then beyond that, I think there's also just been a renewed sense of people are paying more attention to what's going on in the local church. They're excited about what's new. They're excited about what God's doing in our congregations, and this is a way for them to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I had to tell my understanding of what's happened with lay leadership in the Methodist movement, It started off that laity were very strong because they had to be strong. It was a revival
Right.
movement that hardly had any clergy support. And so laity had to step up. They were class leaders and were doing a lot of that pastoral work in the local church, actually more than, well, what you had was Methodist preachers that were circuit riders going around, and then you had essentially lay pastors that were running things on the ground. And then you had the professionalization of the clergy, which began this long trend towards the clergy taking on more and more of the leadership roles of the church. And the laity, even though on paper they're given a lot of authority and responsibility, the clergy are the full-time people that are on site all the time. And you see this bureaucratic taking of authority that you see in every other sphere. And so I would describe, at least by, in contrast to early Methodism, modern day lay ministry is quite weak. And that's because they've been trained to be weak. That's because they've been trained to let the full-time professionals take charge and take over. But even in this dynamic, you've still seen lay votes in the United Methodist Church be much more faithful than the professionalized clergy whenever it comes to biblical holiness. And so within the GMC now, I think you have a bunch of laity that have been trained to be weak, and they've realized, no, we need to be strong. And they're trying to figure out how to be strong. And some of the clergy, like you, were saying, okay, yeah, here's how you can engage the system and participate in it more. But also I'm sensing that the laity kind of need to draft their own way forward. And I've had a hard time discerning, okay, how overbearing are the clergy and denominational structures being in telling them how they've got to get trained? And then how much are the laity really able to step up and take their rightful place? And I'm already wanting to argue with like 6 things that I said just there. So why don't you respond to whatever you want to in there? And keep in mind that a lot of people listening right now are laity. I think more laity than clergy are actually on my page. So what do you think is helpful for them to understand about this present moment in which we're standing?
I tracked with a lot of what you were saying. I think your historical analysis is very accurate in terms of we started out with very strong laity. I feel that a lot of what's happened is, especially in churches where the clergy, as you mentioned, were not aligned in terms of orthodoxy with the congregation, that in a lot of those cases, the laity really did have to step up and exert some leadership that maybe they had been trained not to exert in previous generations. And so that kind of has fueled it a little bit to set the wheels in motion for people being a little more eager to serve and to jump in and be leaders. I believe that there needs to be not just what I'm doing in developing programming to train laity. There needs to be a certain degree of lay-led initiatives. And as a clergy person, I wouldn't begin to speak into that. I believe that's something that they need to discern on their own and see where God is leading them, that they can take on. And one of the things we're doing is in our conference, we're going to do some events this fall that we want to be essentially lay-led. And we've talked about how maybe the presiding elder will get up and make announcements or say a benediction at the end, but we want it from beginning to end to be lay-led. And we want to invite people from our churches in our respective areas to those events so that they see that it's not all about being a clergy-led denomination, that it's about being a lay-led denomination as well.
Yeah, it's like with youth in the church, and you're trying to teach them to take the reins, and you have a youth-led only service, and then it's just, for a micromanager like me, it really is hard, and I know I'm not the only clergy who struggles with micromanaging, but it is incumbent upon us to do it. I mean, we know it's a big part of our history. And the other thing, I've been talking about reading Kevin Watson's book. Have you gotten this yet?
I haven't yet, but it's on my list.
Well, he details some of the history whenever. It's interesting because Methodism was super strong in the laity in the beginning, but laity weren't given voice or vote at the conferences. It was only clergy. And even when it was all the clergy assembled, John Wesley was very clear. He didn't want it to come down to votes. This is not the Methodist Republican Church. It's the Methodist Episcopal Church. And it's only through a series of steps that laity gained voice within the Methodist movement. But even so, as they did it, it seemed like the role of clergy and episcopate. It's a very weird dynamic. I don't have any digested thoughts to offer on that. It just feels to me like we need to be looking at our history as we try and chart the course forward. Let's turn to Dee's question, because her critique, Dee Jenkins, she said she's going through the course and it's great for some kind of basics. And I don't think she's in South Georgia with you. She said it's not really great for equipping the laity to take the helm at one of these churches that doesn't have clergy. And that's a big need in the GMC right now. There are tons of churches, especially rural churches or church plants in urban areas, that cannot find clergy to lead them. There might be a laity that are willing to step up, but they're not really being trained to do that. It sounds to me like that's what Dee is saying. How much of that do you think is just her area, and then how much do you think is really that's the situation in the GMC right now?
I think that she raised a great question, first of all. I think that she is taking her experience in the program and looking at it and saying, I don't know that I'm ready by the end of this training to be leading a church. And I think that a lot of people who go through certified lay ministry training would say that they don't feel ready. I will say, from a training perspective, my role within this, I do not design it from the standpoint of thinking at the end of the training, everyone will be ready to go and lead a church. I'm very much the way I kind of pedagogically, the way I tend to think is I want you to get what you need to get out of the training and to serve how God is leading you to serve. And so with that, I'm leaving a little bit of open-endedness to it, in that I want you to find your calling and your giftings and sharpen those within the program, more so than me dictating exactly what you need to be doing. I think that people who come through our program in South Georgia will be ready to step in and substitute for a pastor. I think they will be ready to lead a church on a Sunday morning if called upon. I don't know that every single one of them would be ready to lead a church as an interim pastor or a long-term license, what we used to call licensed local pastor. Mm-hmm. But I also don't feel that it should be CLM training and then you're on your own. That is where I believe that the role of the presiding elder comes in. That's where mentors come in. That's where the candidacy process can come in if it's somebody who is discerning a call to clergy ordination path, vocational leadership. And so in those cases, to Dee's question, I don't think it's supposed to be the end of your training. I think it's supposed to give you the basic skills that would equip you to go and fill in at a church for 1, 2, maybe a month, 1 to 2, 3 or 4 weeks. And then if you are going to continue beyond.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And sorry, I don't know if that was my fault or your fault, but I feel like you gave a good answer. If I was laity listening to this, I'd be saying, okay, they're trying to equip us and not control us, and that line is really hard to manage. But by God's grace, we're going to figure it out together. So I do have some follow-up questions for you. Shortly after we formed our small church, the certified lay minister we were relying on to lead us was diagnosed with cancer and had to move out of her home to skilled nursing facility. The rest of us stepped up to take turns leading worship while we waited for her hopeful return. Filling in this capacity has been incredibly edifying for me personally, and I hope to pursue it more, and I would love links for other resources to help laity in similar situations. What response to that, Anthony?
So I want to go back just a second, because I know our stream was messing up a little bit at the end of my answer to Dee's question. But, I think that really the CLM program, it prepares you for a basic understanding of ministry and equips you to do what he's talking about in that question, to fill in at a place for a Sunday or a couple of Sundays and things like that.
Right.
Beyond that, I think that's where the rest of our system needs to step in with presiding elder oversight with other pastors in the area coming alongside, maybe mentorship to make sure that people know the things that they're supposed to be doing and are equipped for what they're being asked to do. And we found in South Georgia that eventually people who serve as CLMs for a period of time, a lot of them, if they're serving for a longer period of time, they're going to wind up going to become lay supply pastors and eventually go to course of study and may even pursue ordination. And so there's a little bit of a development that happens there. Now, I will say, to the question that was just raised about what kind of resources are available out there. I mean, the CLM training is, I believe, the best way to offer that. I know off the top of my head, I'm not aware of a lot of conferences that have launched CLM programs. I know that the Trinity Conference has their School of Ministry, which has both a certified lay ministry track and a lay supply pastor track. And they've kind of made a little distinction there, which I think is helpful. In South Georgia, we have the CLM program. I know that Mid-Texas, Allegheny West, I don't know. I get emails from a lot of different CLM coordinators saying, hey, we're trying to get our program running. North Georgia is one that wants to get their program running. And so in the interim, we've actually welcomed a lot of people from other conferences. We did everybody from North Georgia back in the spring that was interested, and also had somebody from Michigan and from West Virginia who participated in some stuff online and then also came in person.
Oh, wow.
So I'm an advocate. I'm a believer in the program that we offer, and that I've seen what the Trinity Conference offers. I believe in what they're offering as being just really, really good training for people who find themselves in situations like he's describing. And I've even had people from some small churches where the lay leader and a couple of other people, maybe the administrative board chair or the worship leader, will come through the program together specifically for that purpose, that they're ready. Now, I think longer term, as a denomination, we're going to develop more resources. We're going to have things that are going to be a little more plug and play. We've started experimenting a little bit with some video-based things where we can kind of make it portable, a little more on demand. We just haven't really gotten that where we want it to ship it out of our conference yet, but that's something that might be an option down the line as well.
You don't get
what
the
about
sense. Well, let me ask you real quick. Remember what you're
Yeah.
going to ask. Do you get the sense that the GMC leadership is eventually wanting to kind of have a one-size-fits-all curriculum that everybody's exposed to, and right now we're just kind of looking at different models? Or do you get the sense that they're going to keep this regional?
That's a hard question to answer because the way it is written in the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Disciplines is that it would be eventually a one size fits all that's distributed from on high, wherever on high is from Commission on Ministry.
Yeah.
I know so I'll give you a little inside baseball. So our delegation from South Georgia, we submitted a resolution or a petition, I'm sorry, for General Conference to modify that paragraph with just a slight update in language that would have made it a little more regional, where each conference could kind of adapt their own and develop their own within a set of guardrails and parameters.
Okay.
And that petition, as most petitions are, has been referred to the next General Conference. So I don't know that we're going to get a clear answer on that in the immediate future. I know that one of the goals of the convening conference is to put together officially our commissions, the 8 standing commissions, I think it is.
Right.
And so that might be something that comes out of the Commission on Ministry once they're fully established. But I'm not sure. I know that the president pro tems, based on the conversations I've had, they're very much in favor of more of a regional approach instead of a one size fits all. As someone who's developed the program here, I think there are some benefits to it.
Right.
But I also know that not every conference has somebody as crazy as me ready to develop curriculum from scratch, and they might want resources that are one size fits all.
Well, it's really cool that that you are crazy in this way, and that yeah, I mean, this doesn't immediately benefit your local church to train all this laity from around the country. So it's really cool that you chosen to spend your time this way. Thanks for doing that. Do you remember what question you had for me a second ago?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you're in the Heartland Conference, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anything going on in lay ministry training in your
I
area?
I bet there is. I bet I've done a terrible job paying attention to what's going on in my conference. I've been, I have no excuse. I've seen stuff training for like prayer ministry. If there has been something for lay ministry, I haven't taken note of it. But I mean, coming from the UMC, I didn't take note of it in the UMC either because I was just like, well, they're going to indoctrinate my people, and so I'm not going to send them there. And I don't feel that way about the GMC, but and in Kevin Watson's book, he talks about how the original training for Methodist clergy and church leadership was an apprenticeship model. That whenever
Mhm.
somebody clearly had the gifts for ministry, someone in ministry would say, "Okay, you're under me now. Come with me. I'll show you how to do it." And I can't help but wonder what that would look like, because what Dee brought up in this line of questioning that I had on screen was that we could be pretty easily reproducing the United Methodist system of kind of this third rail LLC thing. And so, how do we avoid that? Or do we just have to kind of reckon with the fact that we are going to have like second class clergy that just hold the thing together?
Yeah, that's something that I hope we can avoid. I believe that as we further develop the presiding elder role, that can play a role in maybe steering that in a better direction. I like what you said about apprenticeship. I didn't realize that was going to be a part of Watson's book, but I'm looking forward to reading that. We actually, in our leadership and administration module that's a part of our CLM training, we actually talk about apprenticeship and give kind of examples of how it can work. And
Hmm.
that's something that I've tried to model within my local church ministries. We've had people come on staff that had a calling to ministry. I'm, hey, I'm going to let you preach, but I'm not going to throw you to the wolves. I'm going to walk alongside you. I'm going to, and so we do kind of the old model of the I do, you watch, then we talk about it, then we do it together, then we talk about it, and then eventually you're doing it by yourself, and I'm just there to support you. And so we've done that and replicated that with some of our staff where, hey, if you have a calling to preach and we're going to use you from time to time to fill the pulpit, either here or at another church, I'm not going to throw you out there that first time by yourself. I'm going to sit down with you and we're going to do the exegetical work together. We're going to develop the sermon outline and we'll even tag team it. I'll do part of it, you do part of it, and we'll just kind of kick it back and forth. And then the next time, I'm going to help you with all the preparation, but you're going to get up there and talk yourself. And then the next
Yeah.
time, you're on your own, but I'm there to support you and answer any questions that you might have. And so it's hard when, in the UMC, I hate going back to the UMC and being critical of the Egypt we've left, but
Hmm.
the district superintendent role had become such an administrative role
Hmm.
that was bureaucratic and not pastoral and wasn't developing leaders.
Right.
I'm hoping that with less churches in each area, a broader spectrum of presiding elders, that we can either through the presiding elder office or through clergy development and leadership development within our conferences, that we can engage in some of that apprenticeship type work in a
Yeah.
way that a district superintendent never could.
Yeah, that's really cool to me that that's on your radar because, I mean, that's just one of those things that's labor intensive that so many leaders generally don't want to do. Like, if you can just send them a video, then call it square, and just go, why isn't it happening the way that I think it should happen? Well, I mean, it's just one of those things that's fundamentally relational and can't be taught through a screen. Although screens can be helpful, You still have to have
Right.
somebody, a wall to bounce off of and figure these things out. So speak a little bit more about avoiding this tendency to create second class clergy. Do you have a sense of things that the structure, the GMC structure, can do to incentivize people stepping up or stepping out more quickly so that we don't create this middle class? Or do you think that this is just something that is fraught and there's really not much to be done about it?
Right. I think the language we use is important. When you're trying to create a new culture, language is such an important part of culture.
Hmm.
We had a guy who went through our CLM program who is serving a church as a lay pastor. And he came through the certified lay ministry program because he what didn't feel called to go course of study or seminary. And he made a comment in one of our meetings where we were talking about the role of the pastor and the role of laity. And he said, well, I'm not a pastor. And
Hmm.
my co-facilitator, who was working on that module with me, interjected beautifully. And he says, no, 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 you just haven't been to seminary yet. You
Ah,
are a minister. You are a pastor. And I
good. Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's what we need to grow into is that mindset of the priesthood of all believers
Right.
that we're all on the same team. Just breaking down those walls that will help. I will say one thing that I appreciate about the GMC. This isn't really a later related question or the second class, but
Hmm.
I believe that the ability to be ordained a deacon quicker ordained in the UMC has done wonders for the morale of a lot of our former licensed local pastors in the UMC.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. How could it not? It
Right.
seems to me that we've at least done the talk well in supporting lay ministry and lay work. It's just so hard to match the talk with doing things differently, especially when we already have an established way of doing things. We want to imagine that just putting GMC on the church sign out front will magically change the culture, and it's not nearly that easy. It really takes much more intentional
Right.
repentance of the old way and going into an uncomfortable place and admitting I probably haven't been doing it the best way. So I knew I needed to dip my toes into this so I know how to support lay ministry. Because in my own context, I've got some lay people that love the Lord and are good at serving one another. And I think if I were to fan those flames, it could turn into something where they at least much more capably lead in the local context. And I've just had a lot of institutional trust betrayed by me where I send them off to somebody else and they just make them lukewarm or they don't care about our heritage or and so to I just think we're at a point of like learning to trust one another again and earn each other's trust. And then hopefully in 3 or 4 years, I can just be like, yeah, I'm going to send my kids to church camp and know that they're not going to be indoctrinated in some crazy way. And I'm going to send my laity to certified lay ministry school, whatever we call it, and they're not going to encounter anything crazy. And in my head, I know that they're not supposed to right now, but I am fearful that they're going to teach something wonky, and then I'm going to go, we're doing this whole thing again. And that's not a valid reason to not do it. So I repent. I repent. D, I want to show you one more comment that she wrote. She said, I might feel better about it if I knew the discernment process by which laity would be assigned a church. Would I be right in assuming that there is no established structure and that it's all presidents pro tempore doing whatever needs to get done to plug holes?
Yeah, essentially. And that's going to vary by conference. It's very much, and it may even vary within a conference depending on who the presiding elder is. The reality is that when there's a hole in a pastoral appointment, the cabinet of the conference is working whatever angle they can to try and fill that void,
Mm-hmm.
at least on a temporary basis. And I'm not saying that to say there's not discernment involved in it. There absolutely is. But it's probably not going to look the same. I'll say so. Further context on me. I've got a handful of churches that I oversee as a presiding elder. We've got multiple layers of presiding elders in our conference, so
Oh, wow.
I'm like the lowest rung, and so I've only got 9 churches that I work with, and one of them's mine, and one of them is the guy above me. So
How many layers
really
of
isn't.
presiding elders are there in your conference?
So we have the president pro tem, and then we have 5 area or regional presiding elders. And then under each regional area presiding elder, there are anywhere from 2 to 4 connection. We call them connectional community presiding elders. And so that's what I am.
Okay,
So
okay.
I made it sound like it was a lot more nuanced and
There's
layered than it
two.
really is.
Yeah. No, that's still really cool though. I hadn't
Yeah.
heard of that being done. Do you know if that's the norm or if you guys are unique in doing that?
I think we're pretty unique in doing it. I know there are some conferences that have done some unique things with the president pro tem role. They've split that up amongst multiple people, but I think that we're one of the few, at least from the ones I've been exposed to. I think we're one of the few conferences, if not the only, that's doing that with the multi-layer
That is
presiding
so
elder.
interesting. Yeah, no, I'm glad. That's just interesting to me. We're experimenting with structure. Just as y'all flesh out your structure, just let them know that this Okie over here thinks you should call them the big presiding elders and the little presiding elders. You're a little presiding elder. You were talking about how you have charge of, not charge of, but you're overseeing
Right.
several of these churches. Do you remember what track you were on?
I do, and let me say the we kind of go back and forth whether we want to call them regional or area presiding elders for the big presiding elders, but the abbreviation for area presiding elder is APE, and so
I
we've
love
had a
it.
lot of fun with that, calling them the apes.
Hmm.
But yes, so I'm a connectional community presiding elder, which is just way too long of a title. And so I've got 9 churches that I relate to, and we have had 2 pastoral openings that I have worked with in the year plus that I've been assigned to this connectional community. And I will tell you that those 2 openings have been handled completely different.
Right. Yeah.
I'm the same presiding elder. It's the same geographic part of the state. It's the same annual conference, but the circumstances involved in both of them, which I can't really go into, but the circumstances involved in both called for completely different courses of action. And so there was discernment in both, but I can't say that it was a process that's replicatable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. It's the Wild West right now. So I'm assuming a lot of people who click on this to watch later are maybe going to be laity who are thinking about, there is a need and maybe I could step into it and it looks like something new is happening here. It could be really exciting. It could be really good for me. A clear takeaway from this conversation is each annual conference, provisional conference, is quite different. There are different personalities and dynamics at play. But do you think there are any general pointers that you could offer for someone who's thinking about these things to move forward, either answer it spiritually, what they should do, but also practically how they should follow up on that?
So if your conference is offering something in lay ministry training, I would encourage you, if you have a tug, if you feel a call to go deeper in your relationship with Christ and to grow in your ability to be engaged in the ministry of the church, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be a part of. If your conference doesn't offer anything, you're welcome to check out our program in South Georgia. I'm happy to work with you on the remote aspects of that. We do require some in-person work, but we've been able to make it work with a couple of people from out of state. But I think that what the Certified Lay Ministry program does is it equips people who maybe will eventually be lay pastors of churches or lay supply or temporary lay supply, but it also really equips people to lead within their own church. We've had people come through our program that are at the top churches in terms of worship attendance in our annual conference. And they've come through and they've come out and they're not going to replace their pastor.
Right.
Their pastor isn't going to have, their pastor's got two or three associates on staff. They're not calling upon this CLM to fill in for them. But that CLM is leading their Sunday school class or the youth ministry or whatever it is that they're tasked with, that is their ministry area. They're leading it with a lot more confidence and a lot more effectiveness and understanding of their calling and of their role within it.
Yeah.
And so, and that goes to small churches. We've seen a lot of lay leaders from small churches say, "I just want my pastor to be able to take a Sunday off and not worry about having to find somebody from the outside to fill their pulpit." And we're able to equip that lay leader so that they can run the service when the pastor is out of town.
Right
And
on.
so there's just an incredible benefit. And you said something earlier about it's not necessarily benefiting my church for me to invest this time in it.
Mhm.
Well, for me, I look at it from the standpoint of this is a way to live into the world is my parish,
Mhm.
John Wesley mentality.
Right.
And I may be the pastor of one church, but I'm able to tangibly make a difference in the ministry of a few dozen churches across the state of Georgia.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We've already spent more time than I had you commit to, but pretend you're a lay person who's been watching this whole thing. Is there anything else that you think is just kind of a hangnail that you know probably needs to be addressed for them before we conclude this time?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if they've had the time to invest this long in the conversation,
Yeah.
then God might be stirring something in them, and they should explore what opportunities might be available either within their own conference or a neighboring conference.
I'm going to say a little bit more firmly, if you're a laity and you made it to the end of this conversation, God's probably calling you. You should probably make some calls. After you end this video, you should probably pray and then make some calls and just search this out a little bit more, because the Global Methodist Church can't have the same stilted, you're not going to say anything bad about them, but I'll just say where we came from wasn't a great place. We need to do better. We need to do better. And so that'll be a thing to encourage you, laity, to step up and explore this. And if you want to follow up with Anthony, whenever I post this later in the show notes, I'll tell you how to follow up with him and his lay training program. And God bless you in that. Friends, I want to thank you for joining us. And Anthony, thank you for setting aside the time and dealing with all my technical difficulties.
You're fine. Speaking of technology, just real quick, plug that if your conference doesn't have a program, or if you're a part of an annual conference that's looking to develop a program, you can go to the South Georgia website, click on resources, and the first link is Certified Lay Ministry, and you can read about our program, our upcoming schedule, and it's got my email on there. It's not a state secret. You can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Awesome. Friends, I love doing this stuff, and I love that people like you watch it. If you want to support me, go over to plainspoken.locals.com. And even if you don't, just stay tuned, subscribe, and pay attention to the conversation, because there's a lot of good stuff going on. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.